Welcome to Trapping Inc.'s Scuttlebutt podcast. I'm Rich.
I'm Sandi.
And our guest today is Jeff Hagerty, the man behind HAGz Brackets and J3 Outdoors. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you very much, Rich. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Sandi.
Well, you're very welcome. We're pleased as punch to have you here today, and it's nice at this central location that we can get to know so many people that are...
There you go. You just had the lasso around your microphone.
Oh, well, it's good. I was just saying that it's good to see so many people because lots of times we don't have an opportunity. So when we come to something like this, it's great.
We are at the 59th National Trappers Association Convention, and we're in Escanaba, Michigan. And today it actually looks like home. It's cool
Feels
out
like
there.
home.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, it's going to be a nice day.
Little damp. I won't be quite so stifled when we go to watch some of the demonstrations that we're going to see later today. But Jeff, your J3 Outdoors and the HAGz bracket in particular is really interesting to us, and we've been using it now for a little over a year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What though? I want to get to that in a bit, but I want to hear the background. I want to hear the story behind the man, behind the myth, the legend,
the mystery.
So
we make it up as we go, right?
Yeah. Much the same as us then. Yeah,
exactly.
It's all good.
Take us back to the beginning. Not too far back, not where your dad got his sparkle in his eye, but yeah.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. But to how we got started with J3 Outdoors?
I want to know.
Or me.
You.
Okay,
Like, I mean,
awesome. I can go into that. So essentially, I grew up in Michigan, right? So here in Escanaba, in the home state of Michigan, it's always fun to come to trapping conventions here, especially being a trapper in the state of Michigan. In fact, I trap, up here in the UP from time to time. So it's pretty nice being up in this area. But me personally, I didn't grow up as a trapper. I grew up hunting and fishing throughout Michigan for the most part. And so so outdoor activities were always kind of in my blood. As you go through life and, you start down your adulthood and whatnot, I went into, my path was to go into the service. So I went into the service, and spent 6 years in the service. And then, it wasn't until I got out, in the late 90s, that I actually started picking up trapping. So I had moved back to Michigan, and again, I'm a hunter and a fisherman, so I had never stopped doing that when I was in the service, but it was something that I really picked back up on in more earnest when I got out, because I had more time, obviously, right? But so anyway, I got back into that, and the problem that I was starting to face was the amount of predator sign on the grounds I was deer hunting. And I think it's a pretty common thing for most people these days, is they, especially deer hunters, right? So they go through their season and they're seeing coyotes when they're out deer hunting, and, or they're seeing a lot of coyote sign or fox or whatever. But so I think that's what sparks an interest, right? As you start with obviously seeing that game or seeing that sign.
Or sometimes it's just wanting to spend more time out there.
Absolutely.
And it becomes another season, right?
Yeah. It's another hobby that keeps you away from the house, right? Good or bad.
Careful, you do know my wife is here, right?
I don't mean it in a bad way. It's one of those things, man. It just takes you away from other things that maybe you should be doing. Your honey-do list, right?
Yeah.
But, so anyway, I get that kind of urge at that point to do some coyote hunting and stuff along those lines. And it's funny, I was telling people recently that I'm terrible at coyote hunting. I was absolutely terrible at calling, and didn't matter if it was electronic calls, mouth calls, whatever. I was terrible with it. But anyway, so that failure led to trying to explore other ways to take care of my coyote issues. And so that's when I turned to trapping, right? And so I started out right around 2000 with a couple BMI canine woofers. That was my first purchase into the coyote trapping world. Whether it was the right trap or wrong trap, it's what it was, right? It's what I went with. And anyways, it took a few years, and I started getting my fair share of coyotes. And then I started, doing a lot of water trapping at the same time, right? And so here I am. I'm running a mixed line to and from work a lot of the time, and or I'd take 2-3 weeks off, and I'd just run a line southern Michigan, or I'd go out of state or whatever.
So if I could just interrupt for a sec. Many trappers, successful trappers anyway, have something to pay for their hobby. I don't really like to refer to it as a hobby, but the reality of it is that we often can't get enough ground or enough land or whatever to make a full-time living at it. Sure. What is your background? What is your actual trade?
Okay, so my actual career is I'm in IT. So I work on IT server and storage infrastructure. I design and architect systems for a large company out of southern Michigan to meet their product needs.
Okay.
And just like a lot of things, man, it was not the path that was chosen by myself. It was one of those opportunities that you just kind of fall into and you make the best of it, right? When I was in the service, I was dealing with a lot of electronics and stuff. At that time, it was all analog based. When as I was in the service, it was switching over to more of the digital era. And so, anyways, they sent me to some schooling and stuff like that. And when it come time to get out, I took advantage of that and landed a job in Ann Arbor. And I'll have been there for 20 years next month. So, wow. So I've been at the same place for quite some time. But so IT is really what pays the bills, right? And that's what allows me to go on different hunting trips or trapping trips or whatever, right? So that's really what allows me to do what I do, right?
Well, first, thank you for your service.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Now we need good people like you standing on the line, and it's amazing how often that sort of dedication to country also shows up in conservation and trapping, and a lot of trappers have been in the service.
Yeah, good stewards.
Yes.
Yeah,
that responsibility carries right through the core being, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So I mean, so that's so that background, right? So that allows me to do what I do, and or at least got me going, right? Anyways, into the trapping stuff, and give me that opportunity. And I drive an hour one way to work every day, right? In the fall and winter, why not take advantage of that, right? And run a line to and from work, right? So I'll leave early, and I'll start headed towards work, and my line is always changing somewhat, but I always end up at the same spot in Ann Arbor. I just, sometimes it takes me longer to get there, so, it's during trapping season. But so I'll do that, and then, on the way home, I'll run a slightly different line. And then that evening, I'm putting up, whatever the day's catch was. And then rinse and repeat for tomorrow, so it's a lot of fun. It's been pretty cool. So that's really how I got into trapping, right? And really kind of what enables me to be able to do it is really the background that I earned, right?
And an understanding employer.
Yeah. Very, very understanding employer.
It's amazing. Where we come from in Alberta, it's oil country. And you would be amazed at how many companies actually have rules that you're not allowed to have a coyote in the back of the truck. You're not allowed to have a gun or anything else. Because people are traveling out in the bush all the time, right?
Yeah.
And taking advantage of that stuff. So, and of course, us being northern Alberta rednecks and that, I mean, it's hunting season. It's hunting season.
Right.
If I get paid to hunt, that's even better, right?
Yeah. No, trust me, it's interesting when I get to work. It's a fairly large company. It's a very corporate environment. And I'll show up, I've got muddy hip boots on, or, I smell like a coyote or something like that. I got, a truck full of muskrats or whatever, and I pull up into this corporate garage parking structure, and I'm kicking off my hip boots and throwing on my work shoes, you know what I mean? So, it's a very interesting, time of year come trapping season. And I kind of stand out like a sore thumb, but it is what it is. It's just something that I'm taking advantage of it, and my employers understand that. Don't open my tailgate, when I pull in. So quite fun.
Well, I was going to ask you that where you're trapping to and from work, is that all public land that you're on, or do you have permission on private land?
It's private land. 99% of it is all private land. Southern Michigan is kind of interesting to a lot of people. I should say it's different to a lot of people. I mean, like up here in the Upper Peninsula, just west of here is the Ottawa National Forest, and I want to say it's just under 1 million public acres. Okay. Right? We don't have anything like that in Southern Michigan, right? And there's multiples of those throughout the Upper Peninsula. And so there's, up here to someone asking for private permission, to trap it's not necessary, right?
Oh, okay.
So it's totally unheard of, right? When someone comes downstate to trap with me or something like that, and I'm like, what do you mean we can't trap over there? I'm like, man, there's a property line right there, you can't cross that. So Southern Michigan is extremely carved up into private ground. Right. And it's a lot of small chunks of ground, right? So I'm talking 10, 20, 40 acres. There's a lot of that. The farms are disappearing, right? And they're getting smaller and smaller. So your 1,000 acre or 2,000 acre farms, they're now your 300 acre farms and smaller. You know what I mean? So the ground is just getting smaller and smaller. It's getting more carved up. And so what I have to do and how I started was just door knocking, right? Yeah. Being very respectful, trying to, as you approach these property owners, trying to give them some comfort that you're going to treat their property better than what they treat it, right? And just that you'll pick up stuff that you find on their property. You'll pick up trash on their property while you're out there, and just little things, just showing respect to them, right? And so I started getting a fair amount of property as soon as I started trapping, right? And for the first few years, when you haven't even begun to polish your craft, right, and you're struggling, you're going out after those private permission slips, right? And so you've got to go do the door knocking and stuff. But once I started getting to where I was decent, right, and people were noticing that I was pulling, maybe it was 15, 20 coyotes off their property or whatever, then the phone started ringing as opposed to me going and knocking on the door, right?
Oh, that's a big benefit.
It's great, because I am not one, and I know most people don't like to go and burden a property owner with, asking for permission. It's, I hate it. But I don't like it. I don't like going and knocking and asking, but it's one of the things that you got to do if you want to do this sport. But anyway, so funny that, so there's an area between my home and work where, for the most part, the entire town I can trap. I mean, they're all farmers. They're all bicentennial farms. And so deep-rooted family histories in this area, and everybody knows everybody. And I lucked out one day, and I got the permission on the ground I was seeking, and they started seeing coyotes spinning out in their fields. You know what I mean? And then that led to their conversation at church the next Sunday that they got a trapper that's catching coyotes. You know what I mean? It just kind of kept snowballing from there, and so now I've got so much ground up in that area I can't trap it all.
Oh.
You know, so
It's
it
not
makes
a
it
bad
fun.
problem.
It's a great problem.
You bring up a very, very important fact that a lot of people perhaps don't appreciate, but trappers, more so than any other outdoorsman, has to work hand in hand with landowners, has to be respectful of them. And a lot of times that's a big ask to say, you know, can I trap an animal on your land? And if you don't behave properly, you're not going to have a lot of that success getting that land to work on, right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, there's obviously everybody has their own personality and approach and all that sort of stuff, but I try and go very humbled and reserved. Right, when I'm speaking to these property owners, and I'll show them exactly what I'm using. You know what I mean? I'll show them, this is the trap I'm using. It's not going to hurt your dog per se.
Right.
You know what I mean? If your dog were to get caught, but where do you normally run your dog? Or you know what I mean? If you allow other hunters, do they bird hunt? You know, where do they? You know, and I try and have an open communication with them. So I'm going, look, this is what I'm using. This is where I'm going to set it, in these areas. I'm not, obviously you don't know exacts, but if you need to do something, or if you're going to allow somebody to come on there and hunt that ground for pheasants or whatever, let me know and I'll come trip my traps. You got to have an open rapport with that property owner.
Exactly.
Right? And I think that whole respect thing, right? You respect them, they respect you, and it just keeps you coming back year after year. You know what I mean?
It keeps them wanting you back, and then they talk about you at church or wherever, right? In a more positive light. On top of that, I would expect that a lot of these people maybe didn't know a lot about trapping before you came along. So you're educating people along with getting something for them and getting something for you.
Right. No, absolutely. So a lot of what I see, at least in our, we haven't had a coyote problem per se until probably the last 15 to 20 years.
Right.
Then it really started exploding. Now I know, and I see historic pictures and stuff, right, from our counties and whatnot, back in the 80s, where people would catch some coyotes and stuff, but it was predominantly fox, right? But now it's really kind of, the tables have turned, right? And so it's really a coyote overrun area. I wouldn't say overrun, but it's very, very highly infested with coyotes.
Right.
And so these property owners, these farmers, like I mentioned, these farmers, they're older farms. They've been around for over 100 years, 200 years, whatever. But they had an uncle, or they had a brother, or they had a cousin that used to trap that farm,
or grandpa.
Yeah, or grandpa. But they trapped it for muskrats or raccoon or fox. You know what I mean? In fact, I can't think of one at the moment that I trapped that they had one of those relatives that coyote trapped it. You know what I mean?
Right.
So to them, it's extremely interesting because they look at that as obviously a predator that's harming their livestock, or you know what I mean? So you are doing this educational piece, like you mentioned, right? So you're trying to show them, this is what I use for coyotes, and it's, when you catch them, they want to come out to your truck and look at them and pat them, you know what I mean? So it's really kind of fun, being able to show them that, your farm doesn't only hold muskrats anymore, it's also got these coyotes on it.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
So it's interesting to them.
So, a couple things that I want to bring up here is one, they're not used to having to bring somebody in for coyotes. Coyotes have really increased in population all across North America. They're a very successful competitor with people. So you're probably their first experience with a trapper outside of their family. So I always say at the opening of Trapping Inc. that we're the face of modern trapping, and she always laughs and says, nobody expected it to look like that. I think that's a shot. You know what I mean?
I think so, Rich. You might want to have a quick discussion about that when we get off the air here.
So you're the face. You're representing trapping and trappers. So, I mean, that's a lot of responsibility if you think of it that way, right? You don't want to be a slob and create a mess, or leave gates over or whatever open, and you have to be respectful. You talk about the traps that you use. Are you you're using then offset and or rubber jawed? Is that the law in Michigan?
No, I don't use a rubber jawed trap. I use, for the most part, it's interesting to me because I read the pros and cons, right? And you read and talk to the trap manufacturers, pros and cons, and you got your live market and your non-live market coyote trappers. And so you read the pros and cons about the offset versus closed jaw and so on and so forth. So to be honest with you, I've gone back and forth between just a regular round jaw and an offset jawed trap. I don't necessarily see a difference in the impact to a coyote's foot.
If you set it up correctly, where you have a shock spring on it, you have 2-3 swivels, you're going to greatly limit that. I actually think that you can probably do more damage with a rubber jaw in our neck of the woods anyway, where we get the incredible cold. When it's 30, 40 below, that rubber is just as hard to steal.
Absolutely.
So I mean, then it comes down to checking, and you guys have.
Well, that was the other question I was going to ask you. So you run a line on the way to work and maybe a different one on the way home, but you're checking how often then, and what is the
Once
law
a day.
in Michigan?
It's 24 hours.
24
in
hours.
southern Michigan, you have a 24-hour check. In the Upper Peninsula, it changes slightly, but southern Michigan, you have a 24-hour check. For anything that's essentially held live, right?
Yep.
So if you have something, if I have a bottom edge set or something like that, I'm legally allowed to go 48 hours. But no, so I run that 24-hour check every day, and I'll run that line. I'll run that line for 2-3 weeks, depending on what the activity is, and then on my weekends I spend changing it up. You know what I mean? So that's what I do on weekends.
So are you setting back home once again? Most of our coyote stuff is done off of baits. We run bait piles. Are you working off a bait pile, or are you working trails and edges and fences?
Yeah. So we're extremely agriculture ground in southern Michigan. A lot of bean, hay, corn. A lot of that ground, and a lot of ditches, right? So you got a lot of travel ways. I guess what I'm pointing out there with the ditches and stuff. So in southern Michigan, I'm predominantly running dirt hole sets. I'm running flat sets, post sets. I started running a lot of blind sets for coyotes, so I'm trapping a lot of trails, field edges, that sorts of stuff. We don't do a lot with baited sets in terms of bait piles. And then my cable restraint season in Michigan, it starts January 1st. And so it's very weather dependent whether I'll cut over January 1st to that cable restraint system or not. I definitely prefer to use foothold traps when I can. But obviously if I'm getting, piles of snow on top of me, I'll switch that cable restraint system as soon as it comes in,
Yeah, well, and you guys, to me, it's the whole cable restraint idea is so foreign. Very foreign, because we're back in Alberta, back in Canada, most everything is a snare is lethal. Matter of fact, it's going to be a law that it has to be lethal within a certain amount of time, probably within the next 2 years. So for you guys just to try and leash them, basically, is what your cable restraint is, right? It has to relax.
Yeah. That's a can of worms there. It's really a shame the law is the way that it is, and this is in my opinion, right? I don't believe that the cable restraint system is the best system to utilize, but it's what they bind our hands with. So we have to make that cable restraint system work if we want to trap in certain conditions, right?
So what was the focus or reason for them going to cable restraint rather than a lethal snare?
So it was There's a lot of rumors on it. I don't know if you'll ever really get to the bottom of it unless you speak directly with the commissioner or something like that. But then, how many times did that morph right before he got the reason why he made his decisions? But for the most part, it's come from a lot of the organizations that push their focus for running dogs and stuff like that, right? So it's really for the protection of sporting dogs. Is really where there was a big push for it. At least that's what I read in the publications that I get, right? At the end of the day, man, I look at what the law is and I just try and go by the law. I try and stay out of the political game and the reasons of whys and hows and whatnot, because we all know how that stuff works, right? Who's got, the squeaky wheel gets the grease sort of thing.
Well, I think part of it is education, and mostly because people have no real understanding of how a snare kills. Mm-hmm. They don't understand that it's the compression of the carotid arteries, mm-hmm. and the animal just basically grays out, goes to sleep, and dies. They think they choke to death.
Yeah, it's totally not that.
Yeah, the suffocation process mm-hmm. is a terrible thing. So there's that, mm-hmm. and then it comes down to personal responsibilities, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so many people I look at it like this: if your dog ran out in the street and got run over by a car, whose
mm-hmm.
fault is it?
Yeah,
it's yours. You weren't controlling your dog, and that's the way it is in most of Canada. Mm-hmm. Is it's the dog owner's responsibility to have their animal under control, because all public land are trap lines there.
Yeah. Well, the law still states that dog owner should have his dog under control, right? But for whatever reason, the law is the way that it is, and it's very unfortunate. My point of view on it is that I don't believe it's humane, right? I don't believe it's the most humane thing, the way that you restrain a coyote, right? It doesn't feel humane to me.
With the restraint.
With the restraint,
yeah.
As opposed to going to strictly a kill snare. The weird thing about Michigan is here you are imposing these laws, right? But yet, like you mentioned, the education piece. There is no educational requirement, or at least there wasn't ever an educational requirement when they were authorizing you to go out and run snares or cable restraints or anything like that. So they're saying, all right, here, whoever you are, go out and I'm going to authorize you to run this cable restraint, even though you have no idea what you're doing.
Really?
You know what I mean? Yeah, there is no course that you're required to take.
Really?
I have never taken a trapper's course. I have never taken a cable restraint course, a snaring course, anything like that. So now you got these people that are out there and they're running, at the time, snares, right, or whatever, and they're running them in such a poor fashion, right? And now you've got the grounds for, I guess it just provides that negative side of the argument, because you have people that are out there running this stuff that are uneducated, right?
Or
and so,
taught by someone who was
just poorly,
not doing it
poor
correctly.
ethics or whatever. And it's, so that's a shame. You know what I mean? So you could have approached this whole thing, in my opinion, totally different, right? You could have continued to use the same, the best tool for the job, but you could have educated the people that are actually using the tools, right?
Exactly.
And unfortunately, that's not the route that they went, or that didn't end up in that manner. So when I speak about these various things that we're talking about right now, I don't want to come off too overly negative in the sense of having to use cable restraints and the tools that we use, and if we just would have educated differently or something like that. I mean, obviously there's so many different angles and aspects that go into making laws and all of that sort of stuff, and I mean there's all sorts of stuff that goes into it. It's just, my very narrow, viewpoint is essentially, what I'm seeing. But, there's a lot of trappers that have really, gotten to use cable restraints over the last few years, and the attitude towards them has been very negative, right? And I have been
toward
one
the
of
trapper
those.
Or the cable restraint?
To the cable restraint, to the actual law surrounding the cable restraint. The way that the law reads is you have to have, you can't close that that cable restraint any tighter than 4¼ inches.
Okay.
So one thing that you're going to get with that is a ton of backouts, right? Especially from Fox and so on and so forth. So you'll get backouts and stuff like that, but more importantly, you'll get a ton of chew outs, right, in a cable restraint, right? So that's one of the issues that you have with a cable restraint with that coyote sitting there being alive. Now he'll chew through that cable in no time, right?
Yeah.
So it's been a really kind of a negative aspect of being able to use cable, right? So guys were used to being able to run, a totally different system and more of a lethal system, and now you go to this cable restraint, and so you're having to learn things all over again,
Right.
So a lot of guys will try it, and then they'll throw it away and either not trap, or who knows what they end up doing, right?
That's always the biggest frustration, though, when you've actually had that conversation with the animal and have defeated them or outsmarted them, and then to have them lose them on a back out or a chew out, or even worse if they have shoulder mites or mange.
Sure. Oh, absolutely. So I was kind of in that same boat, right? Where when we first started to have to use them, it was quite frustrating to try and utilize a Michigan legal cable restraint and try and hold the animal. Again, just a ton of chew outs and so on and so forth. Over the last couple of years, though, I think I'm starting to defeat the system a little bit. So I think I'm starting to win slightly. And I don't really like to talk numbers or anything like that. But if my memory serves correctly, I believe I put 27 coyotes on a cable restraint last year in January. And I believe I only had one chew out, which was my own fault, I believe, and I had 2 backouts, and one of those I know was a fox. So, in my opinion, 27 and having essentially 3 escapees, right, is a whole lot better than essentially being the polar opposite of that, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So, and interestingly, what I did is. I like, being a vendor now, we travel all over, going to these various conventions and stuff. We get to speak to so many great people, legends in the trapping industry, right, that are, they're either trappers, trap manufacturers, snare men, snare manufacturers, whatever, right, just professionals across the board. But, I like to try and be a sponge, right, so I'll try and pick brains and try and be a sponge and that sort of stuff. And I was in a very interesting conversation with Eric Space, who is a mink snarer out of New Jersey, right? It just blows your mind to even think that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, to snare mink is just wild. But watching his system and then talking to him over the course of a weekend, down in Pennsylvania. Man, I came away with some various ideas, that he kind of sparked. And, man, essentially what I did is I just switched over to a stiffer cable. It's slower, right? It's a slower to close cable, so you got to load the heck out of it. But so, I switch over to a 1x19 3/32 cable for running cable restraints, and you get a lot of people that say, man, that ain't going to ever close on a coyote and so on and so forth. But I tell you, man, if you load the heck out of that thing, that's a very successful piece of cable, right? So I use a very high quality Korean cable with a 3/32 1x19 configuration. I'll use a slim lock, because we have to use, slim lock is what I use on my New Mexico snares, but on my Michigan cable restraints, it's a micro lock because we have to use a relaxing.
Okay. First here, can you tell me what are the specifications of a cable restraint, a legal cable restraint for Michigan?
Oh boy, so a Michigan legal cable restraint is, so first off, you have to have a deer stop that prevents it from closing 4¼ inches.
Okay.
Right, so that's the first thing. The lock has to be relaxing, right? So it has to have a relaxing lock. You have to have 2 swivels on your cable restraint. I want to say 6 feet is the length. Don't hold me on that. I believe that was the last thing. Mine are much shorter, but I believe it's 6 foot is what the max is, and most importantly is no entanglement. right?
So no entangle means you can't even set where the
you
entanglement?
cannot set where you could entangle a coyote.
Wow.
Yeah, because I mean, you could essentially create a lethal set with that same cable restraint if you can tangle them up.
We do it all the time.
Yeah,
except we, instead of it being 6 feet long, it'll probably be 10 or 12 feet long back home.
Give them some runway.
But if you'd probably have trouble with it if you had to set it in the Culver's parking lot down the road. You know what I mean?
Well, that's exactly it, right? So that's what we have to set in, right? So we have to set in, barren ground and, make sure that it's not getting tangled up on anything. So I mean, as you can probably envision, right? So that gives that animal a ton of freedom with that cable, right?
Okay.
And the ability to chew and all that sort of stuff. So going to that stiffer cable has really prevented the chewing, right?
Right.
But yeah, so that system to me has been extremely successful. I started the season before last, playing with it a little bit, and then I hit it, not fully in earnest, but I hit it pretty good last year. With that cable restraint system, and this season I am confident that that system is going to be a successul tool in the toolbox. Put it that way.
Before we move on, I just want to make one comment on the cable restraint. We have the people that are writing these laws, or the people protesting against the cruelty of trapping and that, and they all talk about stressing the animal. Mm-hmm. Having that animal tied up, to me, where it's fighting it for 24 hours, mm-hmm. or it's trying to chew out or whatever, is far more stress than mm-hmm.
The
average minute and a half or 2 minutes that mine last in a kill snare.
Yeah, if they even last that long.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And, it's a very valid point. And so it's not even the stress of being held by that cable restraint, but also it's against their nature. Right, to be out in the open like that.
Oh, exactly.
Being held against so they can't even get under, a piece of brush to hide during the day, or what, to conceal themselves or anything like that. That's stressful, right? So, man, it's you're getting me worked up, Rich.
But I think the big part of what you said was education, right?
Yeah.
So you've taken the time to educate yourself.
Yeah.
By coming to a convention of
mm-hmm.
some sort and seeking out people who do things just a little bit differently.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's probably the key to a lot of trappers' success is
mm-hmm.
taking what they already know and then fine-tuning it to the area that they are. And maybe it doesn't have anything to do with the animal that they're trapping, right?
Sure.
Like you said, the
Sure.
mink snare is really counterintuitive to what you would ordinarily think about for mink trapping. So to put those together with a coyote and come up with a successful application is really great. But I think that's what all trappers can learn from each other.
What I want to talk about now, though, is your HAGz brackets, your HAGz spring clips. They are one of those products that I've learned from and that have increased my success rate. It's been one of those educational pieces for me. Long ways from the coyote world for us, but we've used them for muskrat, and the spring clip especially. I think I could kill every muskrat in the lake with a spring clip. Talk about how this all started.
Okay, yeah. So first off, I am extremely thrilled to hear any trapper, especially yourselves, that are out there having extreme success with this stuff, right? I mean, it means the absolute world to us. But so the way that it started is one of those necessity type things, right? Where the tools that you have are impeding, right? They're not necessarily benefiting you in the manner that fits your style or something like that, right?
So many tools we use because Grandpa did.
Right, exactly.
And we just don't have, a lot of people don't have the time or the foresight or vision to see that it could be done different. Yeah. And that's what I like about people like yourself. You see that there's a better solution.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it. So one of the interesting things, and where kind of the background comes in, is in the Marine Corps, you're taught to adapt and overcome, right? So everything is about adapting and overcoming, right? So any challenge, whatever. And so that kind of has always given me that little bit of, intestinal fortitude to drive, right? And
get up and go again.
Yeah, get up and go. So that's been extremely, important, part of this little journey here. But in my career, I'm an engineer. right? So I engineer and architect these systems. So your thought process is always trying to improve something, right? Whether it's a process or a tool or what, you're always trying to improve something. And so here I am, I'm out on my water line, and I always like to run a mixed bag water line, right? Now, don't get me wrong. There's definitely, moments or times throughout the season where I'll go strictly muskrat or strictly mink or something like that. But for the most part, I like to go up a creek because I like to have fun, right? I like to go up a creek, kick in a pocket set, throw down a stool set or something like that that's got bait on it, or for maybe a soft feed bed or something, right? So I like to just do some variety sets as I work my way up this creek or whatever for everything that's crossing it, right? Fur trapper, man, I'm trying to take all the fur that I can, in a short amount of time. So anyway, so what I was having difficulties with is, man, I kept tipping my pack basket over because I kept digging in the bottom of it for something, And
there is nothing worse than that.
Don't you hate it?
Oh, you need this, you need that. You're constantly back and forth. I know exactly what you're talking about.
So here I am, I'm working my way up these creeks all the time, and I'm I want to put in this set, and so now I got to dig for something different, right? And so what I was finding is, man, every time I have to reach in that pack basket for something, I'm wasting time.
And making a bigger mess.
Making a bigger mess. I did having to dig in the water to pick up my tools or whatever. But so it's just, from an engineering process perspective, it's like, man, you've got to improve this, right? How can you improve it? And so that's when you get into that tinkering stage, right? So that's how it started. It started with the necessity of trying to minimize the disrupt, right, on my line, and trying to make it more efficient. And so most importantly, at the time, the couple biggest sets that I were using, on these creeks, is I would use a lot of pocket sets, right, for coon and for mink and muskrat and stuff like that. But I also really like the vertical adjustable sets, right? So whether I'm setting top edge sets on bridge abutments, for mink as they're coming off those shelves, if you will, or if I'm doing like a baited set or something along those lines. And our drainage ditches that we have on this agriculture ground, if you can envision like this ditch that's 4 feet wide or whatever, but it's overgrown with grasses, right, that lay over, and so now you've got this undercut. Right?
Just a dream.
Oh, they're beautiful, right? But you got this undercut that you can't set a trap there because it's 18 inches of water, right? It's a strict vertical ledge, right, or a wall.
But it's the highway.
It's the highway. So I like setting those. But the problem is here you're carrying all this stuff. So so here what I'm trying to come up with is a way that I don't have to get back into my pack basket for something, to where I can make my sets. I'm not digging for things because it's just slowing me down, right? So what I'm wanting, just kind of describe real quickly my style there with pocket sets and, kind of vertical elevated sets is I'm trying to come up with a device at this time, and this is 2011, 2012 timeframe. I'm trying to come up with a device that I can run rebar stake through, right? And I can put it on, say, a 3/8 inch rod that I can use for a vertical set, right? And so I did just that back in 2011, 2012 timeframe. I had come up with something that I thought was pretty successful. I used it for a number of years. Anyway, so as I was using it more and more, I was like, man, this thing is the ticket, right? This thing has so many uses for me out on my line that I wonder if any other trapper would like to use this, right? And so now the wheels start turning a little bit, and it's like, well, so I have this device, right, that I've been using for a number of years. And I'm trying to figure out a way how I can get it out to trappers so they can be successful as well. And unfortunately, my design, I didn't believe it was manufacturable because it required too many secondary operations, right? And so then you can't necessarily offer it at a reasonable price to people.
Yeah,
right?
that's the problem.
Yeah, and so here I am. I'm not I'm not in manufacturing business. I'm not, nothing left. I'm an IT guy, right?
Hey,
and a trapper.
Listen, I'm a home builder,
right?
And we're the guy that has to build it, right?
Right.
You would be the architect, the guy we talk bad about.
Yeah, absolutely.
You come up with these crazy ideas, and we're supposed to make them work.
Hey, Rich, make this happen for me, would you, buddy? But so I got this awesome, I got this awesome design, and I'm like, man, I just can't get it manufactured. So I was just using it, right? And anyway, so I'm using it for a couple of years, and then literally one of them light bulb moments, right? And this is no joke, a 3 a.m. light bulb moment. Wake up middle of the night, and I turn to the wife and go, I think I've got a great idea. And she goes, what are you talking about? I said, that little thing I've been using for the last few years? Yeah, well, I think I got a way to figure out how to make it, a more of a single operation type of a design. Nothing to break on it, you know what I mean? It doesn't require any screws or welds or anything like that. It's just I think I got a really good idea, right? And she goes, all right. So 6 a.m., I'm out in the fur shed, and I'm, got a piece of steel, and I'm beating it around and cutting holes and all this sort of stuff. And I set it up how I wanted it, and I put my trap in it, and son of a gun, it didn't work the way I thought of it 3 a.m. So here I go. I toss that piece of steel across the fur shed, and I'm sitting there pouting, because I'm thinking, man, I got this great idea. Or I finally figured out anyways how to make it a better product than what I had been using. And so I'm literally sitting there holding this piece of steel between my thumb and forefinger, and I'm going, how can I make this frame end of this trap fit into that? And I look down between my thumb and forefinger, and I'm going, you dummy, it's right there, put a slot in it. It's all about the slot.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So anyway, so that's where it really kind of started taking off, right? So within 2 hours, okay, I've got a prototype that's, the trap is now supported by the frame end in this slot, and I start just punching holes, and I start making bends and stuff like that, because my whole philosophy is around that engineering side, right? How can I make it better? So I nitpick and critique the heck out of it, right? And so here I got this device. It's on a rod and it's holding my trap. I go, well, what about the guy that doesn't have the rod?
Or wants AM FM radio.
Yeah, or wants AM FM radio. Right, so how can we put a transistor in it? Yeah. But, so all this stuff, and I'm going, man, there's got to be a way to, because not everybody's going to want to use 3/8" rods. Right. So I start putting different bends in it, and I start putting a little bit of different angles on it and stuff like that, and man, one thing leads to another, and we've got the HAGz bracket, right? And so, I throughout the U.S., I met with various manufacturers to try to get it manufactured at a volume and at a decent price, and so on and so forth like that. Because our biggest thing, it wasn't about, here's this $1 million idea, right? It was never that. It was about, how can I make something that a trapper can use and be successful, right? Right. And I always told my wife, that is success to me, right? I don't care what the return on it is. How can we contribute back to the community that I have such an interest in, right? That I am so intimately involved in, right? That I eat, breathe, and sleep trapping anymore, right? And so, just being able to be part of the community from that aspect of it, that was our, kind of what I defined as success, right? And so that was extremely important. So now, man, we've had it out for 3 years now. We brought it out actually 3 years ago in New York at the NTA. Cool. At the National Convention. Yup. So this is an anniversary, if you will. So we should celebrate tonight. But so anyway, so yeah, so we brought that out, and then as soon as we brought it out, obviously, some states can't use foothold traps. Some states have to use body grip traps, so on and so forth. And everybody loves the concept of having a stabilizer always attached to their trap. Right?
Well, that I think is the very first, to me, the number one achievement you made is that it's always there. Mm-hmm. You're not digging in your pack basket. Yep. You actually put it on the end of your chain. Mm-hmm. It replaces it becomes a swivel on the end of your chain. Yep. Now you take and slide that bracket down over a 3/8 rod, and just the fact that the hole in it is so tight, the weight of the trap on it wedges it in place, and it's instantly adjustable for the whole entire length of that rod, whether it's 5 feet off the bottom of the mud or inches. So to me, that's the first success, because it's got that low PETA, the low pain in the ass factor. Yeah, I'm not looking for it.
That's my new tagline, low PETA.
Oh, well, I mean, because for us, I mean, you guys know a little bit about winter, but we know a lot about winter, and there is just nothing worse than stuff all frozen into a lump of ice in the bottom of a basket or anything else. So to me, that was a huge success right there. And the second part was the universality of it. I mean, it wasn't just you could use it there. You could use it for a drowner on a drowning cable. You can use it for the larger spring ones will go on rebar, that kind of stuff. But we had just gigantic success using our 120 Marten traps, using your spring clip.
Yeah.
Same idea, fits permanently on the spring. It doesn't inhibit using the trap for anything else, but it fits on there, and it holds it on that 3/8 rod. Well, that with a carrot on the trigger, I tell you what, I could kill every muskrat in a pond with that.
I'm telling you, and I appreciate you saying that. I really do. That was our sleeper, right? So that spring clip to me was our sleeper, right? So again, it wasn't our first prize. It wasn't our flagship, right?
No.
So it was, and when I came, interesting, I don't know if you know this, when I came out with the spring clip first, I designed it to where it fit into the HAGz bracket.
Right.
So the HAGz bracket would be the mechanics to give you the vertical up and down. But that clip had to fit into the HAGz bracket. It didn't have a hole in it.
Oh, okay.
It had no hole in it. I was short-sighted. Right?
Yes.
So, and here I am. I've released a lot of these out to dealers, right, without a hole in them. And about 3 months had gone by, and they were selling, right? They were selling, and so on and so forth. And I'm driving home from work one day. It's not season, so my mind is everywhere else, right, other than on a trap line. But I'm thinking of that spring clip, and another light bulb moment. You dummy, why didn't you put a hole in that spring clip? Right?
Absolutely.
Because remember, it without a hole, it had to be used with the bracket. And I went,
well, now, from a manufacturing sales point of view, that's a good deal.
well, you would think, right?
Yeah.
But it's also, it had a high PETA.
Exactly. It was another piece.
Right? Another piece, a secondary piece. Who wants that, right? If you can eliminate a piece. So, again, they were selling. But here I am, I'm going, oh man, I just made a huge mistake, right? And so, anyway, I go through another round of manufacturing. I get a semi shipment of these things in, and I contact all the dealers and I say, hey, this was my mistake. I'm going to eat this. I replaced every spring clip they ordered.
Wow.
I replaced, and every now and then there may be one or two customers out there. So if you're listening, come see me at a convention. If you bought some without a hole in them, I'll swap them out free of charge. So
free holes.
Yeah, with hole. Yeah, the hole is free. So I will swap them out. But yeah, so as soon as I put the hole on it, right? As soon as I put the hole on it, it was like, wow, this thing is magnificent, right?
Well, the funny part being in Canada, the difficulty we had were getting the 3/8 rods, and of course,
everything's metric there.
Sure.
So I ended up with 10 millimeter, and of course, which is just slightly larger than 3/8. I had to enlarge the hole, and so it limited how many I could get going in my first season with it. So I got a dozen of them going, and we set that dozen 3 nights in a row. We went 35 for 36 on potential. Yeah.
Wow.
Our potential catch was 36, and we went 35 for 36. And I think the one I might have been my own fault. If you watch the show, you'll see how we used it. But I took and set it so that trap the trigger on the trap was sideways, like parallel to the water, and if you set it down too low, if you get waves, it laps against
wave
that.
Will bump it, sure.
Will bump that carrot and spring it. And I think that was out in an exposed point where the one that we didn't have a rat in. But it is so subtle; they swim right up. It's head level, and the bottom frame of a 110 or 120 is just a footrest for them. Yeah, and it boom.
Yeah. Yeah, quick.
Yeah, it is.
Very,
it is.
very fast.
Humane, fast. I mean, everything about it is so you're getting success like that, right?
Yes.
So where you're doing a surface baited set essentially.
Yeah.
Guys, just extremely satisfied bottom edge type sets, right? Or culverts, right?
Yep.
Using them, so they'll run a rod right in front of a culvert, slide the body grab right in front of that culvert, and bam, they're on their way, they're done. And just super, super, super fast. And so that's what I said. That was a sleeper to me, right? If it wasn't for you dummy put a stinking hole in the thing, right? I don't think it would be as successful. And trappers are just loving it because it is, like you mentioned, it's so small. And once you insert it in there, if you insert it properly, it doesn't come out.
Nope.
Right?
Nope.
And so I don't know. I just can't speak highly enough about that little spring clip, man. That thing's cool. I really like it.
It was a sleeper to me too because I was focused on the bracket. I mean, we do a lot of muskrats with using footholds, and in our jurisdiction they have to be a drowning set if you're using a foothold. So there was a lot of floats, that sort of thing. But floats aren't always the best situation, especially if you're getting waves. And of course, we get a lot of wind, a lot of waves. We're northern prairies, and you won't have muskrats crawl up on a float if it's tossing up and down. It's funny. They'll crawl up on the log next to it, but that log isn't moving. Right. So that makes a big difference. We've had both the spring clip and the bracket for the foothold been hugely successful. Like we did lots of where we'd set two double floats. We'd have a spring clip with the 120 in it. We'd have a couple of footholds on poles, and we'd get rats on those and not on the float. So I mean, it's not always the number you get out there; it's how productive that number is.
Absolutely.
Well, and it's also what we load the canoe up with, right? So when we take the canoe out on our anniversary cruises that he takes me on.
The wreck of the Hesperus.
Yeah. Well, our anniversary's in October, so we're out rat trapping. And he always calls it the anniversary cruise. So whatever. But
you gotta take your lady on a cruise once a year, right?
Absolutely.
I even volunteer to sing.
Yeah, that's what you signed up for, Sandy.
Lord knows I didn't know it, but now I do. But when you think about what's in the bottom of the canoe and how many of those floats that we can actually put in the bottom, it's a much simpler, easier system to use just the brackets, everything that's just on that rod.
Yeah, so you got your traps and your rods, and that's really like, and you bring up a good point. So I like to tell people safety. Right. Yeah. So just from a safety aspect, if you're trapping out of a canoe or something like that, and you're used to running, bamboo sticks or willow sticks or maple sticks or whatever you're running, man, you can't bundle that stuff very good. Nope. It's very insecure. So it's there's a safety factor with that, right? It's heavy. You bundle, 50 rods, in a little 3-inch piece of PVC or something like that. I mean, it's a lot more secure. Yep. It's a lot less weight, so on and so forth. And you're not carrying, 3-foot stacks of floats on top of each other. You know what I mean? It's just, there's something to be had with downsizing to that system, right? Besides just the improved catch, that there's really safety in it.
It's funny though too, because we do a lot of rat control for ducks unlimited and Delta waterfowl. So these are all in projects they have that are all in the farmland, private land, basically in Alberta, and it gets really quickly if you go out and you crash a lake. That's what we call it. We call it crashing a lake. We might put out 60 double floats and then all of our brackets and poles and all that. Now we get more and more poles, and somebody tells me, well, you should get more poles because otherwise we're making multiple trips with the canoe.
Sure.
Sure. And trying to paddle in the wind, and that she's not a big fan of that either.
It makes it sound like I'm not a big fan of anything.
The SS Minnow needs a motor.
And we can't have a motor.
No, we can't. But it's kind of funny how quickly it has changed our attitude, because we're getting to the point, well, how big is that lake? Well, now, we've got about 5 or 6 dozen worth of spring clips and brackets set up, and we'll just take the brackets, and then that's all we're going to need, and that's just one trip in the
sure,
and so that's the one trip to go get set up, and one trip when you pull them a couple days later after you've cleaned up the lake,
right?
And it's a lot less work. It's amazing how well that has worked.
Yeah, we engineer for laziness.
No, that whole PETA thing again, right?
It's the PETA thing, absolutely. No, but again, I really appreciate you guys using it and having some success with it. To me, again, that's been the big, what is defined as success on my side, right?
We have never been people to put up with useless stuff.
Yeah.
Never.
Yeah.
It can be the greatest product, have the greatest reviews for everybody. If it doesn't work for me, it's not with me.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I don't have time for it.
Right.
Because at the bottom of it all, we are still trappers, no matter whether we do TV and podcasts or whatever. We're still trappers.
Yep.
And if I can't not having success, that takes all the enjoyment of my life out of it, and that ain't gonna happen.
Yeah. You still kick it in the mud, right? And
exactly.
You've only got so many seasons. Why waste time? Doing it with something unsuccessful, right?
We're kind of unhappy that there's only 4 months out of the year that we can't trap, and a lot of you folks that we're talking to here on the grounds at the NTA, they have like an 8-day season. For coyote, no, that's for everything all year long. 8 days?
Yeah, wow, that'd be miserable.
Oh my gosh,
that would be miserable.
Oh my
But
God.
I think the great thing about this is we used to think about old-time trappers, and they didn't have the method of communication that we have today, but a lot of them were closely held personal secrets. They didn't want to tell anybody how they were catching a marten, a fisher, a muskrat, a coyote, or whatever. And now we live in an environment where we've got access to information, but more than that, we've got people like you who are looking to make life easier for trappers. And when you can get that word out and more people are using it, it just makes a much better community, right?
It's great. And the thing is we're no different than that trapper walking by right there. You know what I mean? Because every one of us tinker.
Yep.
It's a matter of refining whatever it is that you're tinkering with enough, and then just saying, heck with it, let's do this, and let's introduce this to the community and make the trapping community even that much more successful. And so it's fun, man, and I love coming to these conventions and hearing from kids. Oh my goodness, we hear from so many kids. The one thing, so I touched a little bit on safety before, in a canoe, but from a parent's perspective, right? So I don't know if you thought about this. One thing that we get a lot of is, obviously a young kid can't go in deep water, right? Nope. He's up over his head. But a dad can set a trap, slide a bracket on a rod, put that trap in that bracket, hand the rod to the kid, and that kid can put that rod anywhere he wants in that pond from the shore. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Or maybe it's from a canoe or whatever, but that's his set.
Yeah.
He never gets his hands inside that trap. You know what I mean? But he gets to put that trap where he wants, right? You can't do that with a pocket set, or you can't do that with you got to put your hands on that trap. Here, you're using the rod, right? Whether you're using the body grip or whether you're using a foothold, you can hold that rod and put that trap wherever you want, right?
That's right.
And so we get dads that come up to us all the time and go, man, my 5-year-old kid just caught 50 muskrats last year. I'm going, well, how the heck did he do that? That's fantastic. It's like, man, I set the traps for him and hand him the rod and he sticks it where he wants it. I'm like, that is sweet, So that's been really, really cool. It's been a really cool piece
of
it.
The access for kids, the safety, as you say, and then it builds that natural curiosity, and they've got success, so that builds on more success, and then you've got a trapper.
Now it's what's next. Next? Now I'm otter trapping, I'm beaver trapping, I'm coyote trapping, I'm fox trapping. You know what I mean? And it's phenomenal.
They are the future.
Phenomenal. Absolutely,
they are the future, and we need a lot more of that.
Yep.
It's sometimes a little depressing to come to these events and see how old we're getting.
Yeah.
Well, you are. I'm not, but
I'll never catch up to you. I know that. Time ticks the same for me as it does you, buddy.
It's just been ticking longer for us.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, we've probably been married longer than he's been on the earth.
No, I don't know about that. But
we want to thank you for taking time out of your busy day here at the 59th National Trappers Association Convention to come talk with us. We sure appreciate it. You're not only a great vendor and manufacturer, but you're a heck of a representative of the trapping industry.
I trust me, I don't take that lightly. I fully appreciate every word that you guys say. Definitely appreciate it. I appreciate you seeing that. And again, like I said, I appreciate using our stuff. Man, this is what we are, right? We're trappers. I guess, as you say, we're the new face, right?
Yeah.
It's not a bad thing,
right?
You know, when you're out there and you're the face of trapping, it makes people a little bit more inclined to participate, I think.
Yep. So, again, thank you guys, and I do want to say your guys' show is awesome. Love watching it. If you're tuning into this podcast and you haven't seen Trappin' Inc., tune in. It will definitely be some TV worth watching. Put it that way.
Well, thank you very much.
You're
we
welcome.
have lots of fun out there doing it, so it's great when people watch and we've actually our reach seems to be expanding here just based on the number of people that we've encountered on the grounds this weekend.
It's getting hard to get to the washroom. Sometimes it's nip and tuck whether I got to talk to another person or whether I'm going to get through the door.
It's a great show, and you guys as well are great representatives of the trapping community, and it's been a pleasure to be associated with you in the way that we are. So
thank you
very much.
Thank you. And for everybody out there listening to this, we can be found at trappinginc.com. There are links there to our Amazon Prime feed, and there are links there to our YouTube feed, our Facebook. Come check us out, and we will hope to see you all here again in about 2 weeks. Thank you.